welcome to Get Fruitful Conversations. I'm your host, Anwen Cooper, and if you're interested in growing a passion-fueled, purpose-driven enterprise and believe that business can be a force for greater good, then this is the podcast for you. Each episode, I'll be talking with inspiring entrepreneurs and inviting them to share how they're pioneering new ways of working to create more prosperity and positive impact for people and the planet. We'll be bringing you fresh insight and practical actions to generate more income and impact through your own business. Our purpose is to give you new perspectives on how to align your vision to a bigger mission in a way that fulfills your personal potential while also generating a longer lasting legacy and more value for all. So thanks for tuning in. I'm delighted you're here to listen. Now let's get fruitful with today's conversation.
Great.
So, hello and welcome to anyone who is listening or watching live. And hello and welcome to anyone who is watching the recording later.
I think the ones watching the recording later are the smart ones because they're probably pressing, times 1.5 or times 2. So yeah. I might slow down. So, no, I'm only kidding.
So my guest today is Paul Dunn, who is co-founder of the global giving movement B1G1. He's also a TEDx speaker, master presenter, chief storyteller at Clarity, and he runs lots of other interesting things, doing mentoring and hosting exciting global events. He has been working with B1G1 as co-founder for the last 14 years. And for those of you who are listening or watching from Kent, he also has a Kent connection, which he might tell us a little bit more about in a bit. And he also has studied at Stanford University Graduate School of Business. So he has many years of business experience and expertise. And I'm really delighted that he's here to talk with me today. So welcome, Paul.
Oh, that's a lovely introduction. Thank you. It's a thrill and a privilege to be with you. And thank you for all those who are listening, be it on the recording or be it live. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. I think you're dialing in from Singapore. Am I right?
That's where home has been, and it's kind of like being really home, right? Since March 2020, I lose track of time. Because up until that point, if you looked at my 2019 year, it was close to about 500,000 kilometers in the air.
Wow.
And I've gone from that to literally zero. And it's very interesting when the previous year when I got home, from multiple trips, the welcome I would get when I got home is, this is the first thing the kids would say, "So when are you leaving again?" That was the first thing. So now they get to put up with me, hopefully in a good way, since March of last year.
Yeah. Wow. Well, what a difference a year makes.
Indeed.
So obviously the theme of this conversation is all around business as a force for good, and as co-founder of B1G1, I know you're making a huge contribution to enable small and larger businesses to create more good in the world through what you do. And I'm just interested to kick off with a question about, what does business as a force for good mean for you?
I think there's all sorts of different ways of expressing that, but I think the thing you mentioned, that all sorts of things have changed, right? And I think in many ways what's happened since March 2020 has been that this whole idea of force for good, which was first mentioned way back in 2015, when the global goals, those 17 global goals that we must hit by 2030, when they were first mooted. And that's when someone said, business should be a force for good. But I think more recently, so in the early days, it was kind of like a catch cry, right? It was like, oh, business is a force for good. I think what we now understand is, and we look at some of the massive changes that are there, I think we now see that we've moved from a position of it's all about me to it's all about we. That's a really fascinating change. We've learned that yes, value is important, always will be, but values are more important. And what you stand for is really important. And so what you could stand for is profit. That's what business have stood for a long time. On the other hand, you could understand what all of the data has been telling us for quite a while, but now accelerated, and that is that purpose follows profit. Not sorry, not the other way around. Profit follows purpose. Yes, I have it several ways. Yeah, profit follows purpose, and there's all sorts of stuff. If you're sort of profit minded, now, by the way, that doesn't mean that yes, I'm going to get on purpose because I can make profit. That's not the idea. It doesn't work that way. But there's all sorts of stuff now. A recent Deloitte report, for example, was talking about some of the things that now happen once you create this whole the whole purpose thing in your company, which, by the way, is not that easy to do. Although there are now easier ways, and B1G1 is certainly one of those ways. And I think the way that it comes up for me is this: that if you, and again, the pandemic accelerated this. And by the way, when I'm talking about the pandemic accelerating things, I'm in no way trying to downplay all of the awful things that happened there, and continue to. But what you begin to see, and I think you can see it in binary terms now, actually, I think you can see two different sorts of businesses. You can see standard businesses. I used to call them ordinary, but let's call them standard now because it gives me a good alliteration. So there's a distinction now between standard and what I call stand out. Stand out. The people that customers want to go for like moths to a flame. The people that become, or the companies that become magnets for talent, right? What's the distinction between standard and stand out? And the answer is that they stand for. They stand for something. And that something is bigger than themselves.
Yeah. And
being a business for good is this kind of catch-all that we are here to do good as businesses. I rather like what Paul Polman says in his most recent book, came out, on 5th of October. Actually, it's not his most recent, it's his first book. And you may remember Paul, he was the CEO of Unilever, and much lauded for his work on all of this. And he and his co-author, Andrew Winston, and this thing has been published by Harvard, the book. And the first question in the book is this: is our world better off because your business is in it? Fascinating question,
Yeah,
so
great question to
businesses, exactly. So businesses for good get that the answer to that is yes, and they also get yes, and we can do even more, right? So let's sort of sit back and no, it's an ongoing quest, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That was really clear, I think, really great perspective on the meaning of business for good, where it came from, and different ways in which people can think about it, and also how they can apply it to their own business as well. So thank you.
Pleasure.
Obviously, you've had a very interesting career in business. I touched on it briefly in my introduction, but I want to invite you to expand a little bit and fill in some of the gaps that I missed in my quick summary. And tell me, what have been your biggest learnings along the way?
Oh, wow. That is such a great question. That is such a great question. And it's such a great question that I don't really know how to answer it because someone said to me the other day, okay, so as you know, I won't tell you how old I am, but I will tell you I was born in 1943 November. So there you go. So that sort of gives it to you. So there's no such thing in my thing as like a short, give us a short thing, because it's a little bit long. But what I will say this is, someone asked me, they reminded me the other day of a question that was once asked of a very famous speaker. His name is Zig Ziglar.
Oh, yeah.
And Zig was 83 years old. And someone said to him, Zig, don't you think you should slow down? And Zig looked him straight back and said, look, I don't have as long to go as you, so I think I should speed up. Right? So that's kind of like where I come from. And I think that the biggest learning, just to go back to your question, is the value of curiosity. To always be curious and curious about the tiniest things, not just the big things, but the tiniest things. Because one of the things you also start to realize is that sometimes we see massive change, but we forget that it started with some tiny little thing. So what is that tiny little thing that you might be able to do in your business, which makes people go, oh my goodness, that was amazing. How'd you do that? Sort of thing, right? And to realize that those tiny little things really cost very little to do, very, very little to do. And yet they have massive impact, both on hopefully the customer and on you. And of course, as a result of your leadership prowess and stuff, on your team. And so what actually happens is you're changing up the story by that curiosity and continuing to go, wow, we could do this. Oh, wow, we can do this. And of course, the whole point of that is that, as you know, just think about that thing about story. And let's just imagine, for example, just to give an example of it, let's suppose you might say, well, my business has a story. Yes, your business has a story. Of course it does. Let's take a professional service firm. Let's take an accountant, for example. Right? So how does the accountant tell the story? Well, the accountant gets invited to tell the story when they're on a Zoom call or when they're on a gathering, which in the United Kingdom, of course, you can do right now. We can't do that yet in Singapore. Although they just opened up a travel lane from Singapore to, Singapore to the United Kingdom, which means that I don't have to quarantine both ways. So someone at this networking function says to the accountant, what do you do? Right? And the typical accountant might go, well, I'm an accountant. Right? And whereupon the person says, oh, I just need to go to the toilet rather quickly.
Bye.
So exactly. Whereas somebody who's really on purpose and is really a force for good is going to say it slightly differently. They're going to say something like, well, I'm what's called an impact-driven accountant. And so what I do and my team, we help our clients create and run extraordinary businesses which change lives. That's what we do. Yeah. Oh my God. I know.
That's really powerful.
Isn't it? It's very, very powerful.
And engaging.
And exactly. And so you're telling a story, right? That is the story. You just told the story. So you can choose to tell the story like, I'm an accountant, but that's not a story. That's really not the story. And as we were saying earlier on, that I think now, if you think about, obviously the world has changed and it's changed forever, and it's profound. And so if we're trying to serve our customers with the same story, whatever that story was, guess what? We're not connecting in the way that we should. So I think it's very important that we change up our story, and so that our customers or clients, call them what you will, can change up their story as a result of all of that. So it's not just about that doesn't mean, by the way, that you have to learn how to tell a story. I think most of us know how to tell stories. But what it's saying is we have a responsibility to change our story, not just the way we tell it, but to change the story. And part of that change of the story is, well, you know what? Why don't we set about becoming a business for good? Wouldn't that be interesting? Right. So, yeah.
Yeah, fascinating.
I hope that's making sense.
Yeah, I think so. So my next question is about inspiration. I'm keen to know what inspires you. What gets you out of bed in the morning? What motivates you to do what you do?
Oh, well, again, seriously, the tiniest things.
And that speaks to your little strapline on LinkedIn, doesn't it? If I search for you on LinkedIn, you're Paul Dunn, the magic of small. Can I ask you a bit more about that?
Yeah,
do
yeah,
you
you, so,
go with
you
that?
sure you can, sure you can. Well, I mean, sometimes I think it's almost like a disease, and it comes back to that whole curiosity thing. So, for example, we casually swipe up our iPhones, right? And I look at that and I go, how do they do that? How do all those pixels move? And how do they look so quickly, move so quickly? So what gets me up each day is that there's always something, I think, that's new, or that you've heard expressed a different way. There's always more opportunities to serve. And instead of a lot of people would say, well, one of the things that okay, let's look at that slightly bigger. So some people, particularly now, and I'm not again knocking this, but as we've been sort of knocked around mentally and all of those things as a result of what's been going on, then one of the things that happens is sometimes we think we've lost our way, right? Oh, we lost the way or whatever, right? And so if you read all the books, and again, I don't want to knock the books, but the books say, or some of them say, or at least my interpretation of what they say is, well, you got to look inside, you got to find the strength inside, right? I get what they're saying, but I think, and this is again getting back to getting up in the morning, I mean, I could lay in bed and contemplate my navel, I guess, and look inside, or I could get up and look outside and see what's going on, and then go, oh, you know what? There's an opportunity to do something there. Oh, I never realized that. Oh, look at that. All of those sorts of things. So it's kind of a weird existence, but it's fun. No, because well, the other thing is, I think the other thing that's like as for example, right? I'm looking out over a road right now here in Singapore in this condo. I'm actually looking out over some woods as well, which a lot of people think, no, you can't be because you're in Singapore.
No.
But no, I actually am. And there's a bus stop right outside. But let's imagine I was, out there in somewhere, and I was looking there, and there was someone who was infirm in some way and they wanted to cross the road. Guess what? I'm going to help them cross the road. How do I feel when I do that? I feel fantastic. And hopefully the person I helped across the road feels pretty good as well, particularly if I dodged some traffic with them. So then you get, or at least I get, right? We are all at our best when we're giving. Right? It seems pretty simple to me. And I don't mean by that we're best, when it comes to giving money or anything like that, but although that's obviously part of it. But it's just when we are giving as opposed to in our shell. And of course, the men listening to this podcast, they don't have shells, they have caves, right? The men, we go off in our caves, right? And we kind of disconnect, and we disconnect from ourselves and so on. Your wry smile says, you know what I'm talking about here. But I love what Brene Brown, one of my fellow TED speakers, said about that. And one of the joys of doing TED is that you get to hang out with people like that. And Brene, as I'm sure everybody knows listening to us, is a hoot. She really is. But there's a particular moment in her first TED talk where she is deadly serious. It happens at like this, she's laughing and everything else, and she gets to, I think it's like the 6-minute 30-second point from memory. And there's this slow pause, and she sort of stops, and she talks about young teenage guys who are choosing to end it all. And she talks about an epidemic at that particular point. And then she makes this observation. She says, connection is why we're here. Yeah. It's what gives meaning and purpose to our life. Or if you look at it the other way, if you want meaning and purpose, then go connect. Right? And the sad part is that we're not going to connect in our cave. Right?
Yeah. It's a bit limited.
Exactly, a little bit limited in the cave, right? So
although we do have the power of the internet.
Well, that is true. We could go in the cave with We could, yeah, we could.
Yeah.
That's going to be fun, by the way.
But a virtual connection.
Yes, yes. So hopefully, again, hopefully that makes sense. And it all comes back, doesn't it, to what we choose to do. A friend of mine said a while back, a long time ago, he said, Paul, you are where you are at this particular point in time, both in your life and your business. It's simply as a result of the choices that you take at the various moments of your life. We all have these moments, right? And then you bang, you take that particular choice, which then creates another moment, and then bang, you take that particular choice. And so all of these things amalgamate. Exactly, yeah.
To bring it back to connection.
Exactly, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, great. Well, I'd like to invite you now to share a little bit more about B1G1. People who've been following me for some time will probably have heard me talk about this global giving movement. In fact, just in the last week, I hosted an online masterclass workshop, and I set it up so that registration was pay what you wish by charitable donation. And thanks to the generosity of everyone who took part in that workshop, we were actually able to raise enough funds to plant 250 fruit trees through a charity that I support through B1G1. So people have probably heard me posting about that over the last week. And over the last year or so that I've been a member of B1G1, I've been supporting a range of different causes. Last year, we were doing a business book club. Everybody who attended the book club enabled us to give books to children in a school in India. I've also hosted a virtual business lunch, and people who attended that, we gave a meal to a child in need in Cambodia for everybody who attended the lunch. What else? We've done some sort of networking and business events on Zoom, and for people who attended those, we funded another project. So yeah, I've been sort of selecting projects that I think are interesting and relevant and have some kind of connection to the work that I've been doing over the last few months, and I've been really enjoying being a member of the community.
That's so nice. That's so nice.
So yeah, I have been sharing a bit about it to my network, but for people who don't know, I just would love you to tell us a bit more about what B1G1 is.
Well, thank you. And by the way, for those listening, and I know I don't wish to embarrass you in any way, shape or form, but I just looked it up actually. I looked it up earlier, but I just wanted to make sure I got the number right. And you are sailing very close to 6,000 impacts. We think that of that as 6,000 smiles, and that's a lot of smiles, right? And interestingly, you mentioned the fruit trees. What's very interesting about those trees is that it's an organization called Mango Tree, and what's very interesting about those trees is a typical fruit tree grows or mango tree in particular, takes about 8 years to grow. What they said was, well, how can we get it to grow quicker? And so they cross-pollinated it, or however you describe it, with a fast-growing Kenyan tree. So now the tree takes 2 years to grow. Wow. The second thing that's important is, instead of it being a big mango tree, the trees grow at kid-picking height, which is quite amazing. It just happens that way. And each, just brilliant fruit, and 800 or so mangoes. And what they do is they encourage the people in that community, which, by the way, was started because someone got a phone call that said, you are going to look after 9,000 orphans. That's how that all started. Gosh. Seriously. Yeah, exactly. Imagine getting that phone call. What would you do? And this lady, her name is Consolata, she knew that orphanages are not probably a good way to do it. So she found other ways of doing it, and particularly with extended families in that particular area of Kenya. And so what the families do is they are encouraged to buy 10 of these trees. And in 2 years, guess what happens? Well, they've obviously got food as well, but then they go down to the market, and that group of trees will actually fund 2 kids at school for an entire year. So we tend to think of trees as doing good things for sequestering carbon and everything else, but there's actually more.
Absolutely. And that's why I love that particular cause. I mean, I'm really interested in some of the other causes that I've connected with through B1G1, but this particular one I think fits really well with my business, because what I do with all my clients, the name, but what I try and do with everyone that I work with is encourage them to think about the triple bottom line. So when we look at their vision and purpose and their mission, we're not just looking at the profit, as we were talking about earlier, we are looking at the purpose as well, and the brand values. And I'm encouraging people to think about the positive impact that they can have on people, whether that's customers, employees, supply chain, people in the community, whatever that is for them, but also positive impact on the planet. And I just think this particular charity, for me, ticks those 3 boxes of the triple bottom line. Because it's creating trees which are needed for the planet, it's creating great opportunities for people, interesting, meaningful work, and money at the end of the day for them to support themselves as well.
And they've got a little bee farm right next door to it as well. So the bees, seriously.
Yeah.
So to get back to your question, and so I think the sort of historic thing or the history making thing, if you like, in B1G1 was this realization, this change up. It really is quite a significant change up, because in the past, what people would say is XYZ, that company proudly supports, ABC, that particular cause or charity over there. And, what would happen is, once a year we might have a charity ball or something or whatever, because we tend to think of, that takes, large amounts of money to do that. Plus, we have to do all the due diligence just to make sure that the money goes, et cetera, et cetera. So what B1G1 did or said, the simple idea was, what if you could structure something so that every business transaction, and it need not be a monetary transaction, every business transaction actually did good in the world. So let me give you for example. Here we are on Zoom and via LinkedIn and everything else. And just because we're here on Zoom, 11 kids are getting access to game-changing education, just because you and I are on Zoom. Okay.
Oh, brilliant.
And that's happening automatically. It's all linked. And people go, oh my God, how do you do that? Well, B1G1 makes that possible, and it makes it possible, as and with 100% of that which you give going to where it goes because of the structure of B1G1. That you can actually do those sorts of things instead of waiting until you've accumulated masses of funds, kind of thing, or until you've quote unquote made it. And have you ever noticed people who try to get wait until we make it? Have you ever noticed they don't quite make it? Have you ever noticed that? So you can give from 1 cent in B1G1, or you can create that kind of impact for just 1 cent. And so it's it's quite amazing. And I must say, when you said earlier on about the power of small, I remember way back in 2007 when we were, when Masami, my co-founder, came up with that simple idea in a mentoring session that we were doing. And it's like, oh my God. But I never thought that it would have the impact it had. So as you know, as a B1G1 member, about 6 weeks ago, we celebrated in a nice way, crossing $250 million. That's like with a B, right? I could say 250 million, but $250 million sounds better. Yeah. $250 million impacts. And so again, that's like the class example of, tiny stuff, big stuff happens at the end of it. And so B1G1 makes that eminently possible. Oh, by the way, the other thing that's very interesting is, as you know, this whole thing around purpose is gaining strength. Thank goodness, and the whole business for good thing. And what you're seeing is at a large business level, there's new acronyms entering the lexicon, right? So we're seeing things like ESG, which is environmental, social governance, And then because of ESG, then all the accounting fraternity gets involved, and then you go, oh my gosh, and all of a sudden it becomes very challenging again. And da-da-da. So I wrote a post recently that said, instead of ESG being, massively complex and everything else, why don't we just make it stand for something else? Why don't we make it stand for embed social good? It's very simple, right? And so we can just pop it right in the middle of what we do. And in, as you know, again, in B1G1, link it to the goals and all those other sorts of lovely things, and track the giving so you can see where it's happening. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. So we're going to wrap up in a moment. And before we go, I will invite you to share links and things like that so people can find out more if they want to follow up. But before we do that, just want to look to the future and ask you, what are your plans for next steps, or what's coming next for B1G1 or for you or the world of business?
Well, what's coming next? The next big celebration, I'm sure, will occur at 500 million, but the next big one in a goal way is not that far away. Actually, it's 2025 when we hope to hit 1 billion impacts, which will just be massive, and hoping or working hard to get 1 million members in B1G1, making that happen. So that's the big one right now in terms of scaling it. And what's interesting is, when you start to do that sort of thing, you realize that because we've seen what happens, it's like, oh, you've got a responsibility to do that now, right? You can't sort of say, oh, well,
you said it now. You've
game over. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So that's the big thing. And of course, for those of us in business, I mean, the massive understanding of all of that, which is a very challenging thing, is that you as the business owner, if you will, have to get out of the way of it. You've just got to get out of the way because if you look at what's the word, it sort of sticks in business, you find it's usually from the business owner not being able to realize what their job is, and their job is, of course, to kind of be the conductor of the orchestra, not the individual player. And I love what Neil Donald Walsh said about that. He said, you measure a leader not by the number of followers they have, but by the number of leaders that they create. And so that becomes our task, which is really fun.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
So yeah, in our final few moments then, please do share, how can people find out more about B1G1? Where should they go for more information?
Oh, very simple.
Or to keep in touch with you.
Yeah, okay. Well, I don't mind people having a little in my email. I love it. Having said that, connect, we're here. Connection is why we're here. Then I should make that easy. So yes, you can find me up on LinkedIn. There, Paul B1G1 on LinkedIn. You can find me on email. It's simply paul@b1g1.com. And of course, if you want to find out even more about B1G1, then just go to b1g1.com. And there's all sorts of things that you would find there that hopefully are even deeper than Anwen and I have been able to go today. And hopefully, as you go there, you'll find something that resonates, and you can go, well, you know what? Let's just give this a whirl. Let's just give this a try and just see what it feels like. And you will find, as you were kind of saying, Anwen, it feels good. It feels really, really good. And that feeling good, I mean, is, again, you get this lovely virtuous circle. That feeling good then flows out to everything you do that day. So go for it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Paul. It's been really great talking to you today. I hope people feel inspired to go away and think about how they can give more through their business.
Thank you.
Have a bigger impact. Maybe go and check out B1G1. And just one final thing before we go, I'm just going to flag that B1G1 have a really fantastic referral scheme. Every time somebody joins the community with a referral code from an existing member, they leverage that connection and give to even more causes. So if anybody does think about joining B1G1 as a result of listening to our conversation and wants to use this referral code, then
listen very carefully, because it's not an easy one. So
yeah,
listen carefully, write it down. Here you go.
Enable 50 days of access to education for a child somewhere in the world.
Pretty
so
cool.
My referral code is BM14003. So if anybody wants to use that when you join, that would help to give even more good.
Brilliantly done.
Into the world.
BM14003. Did I get it right?
So yeah, there we go. And I'll put it in the notes and the comments as well.
Fantastic.
Brilliant. So yeah, thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you. And Anwen, we should make this at least an annual occurrence, right? So it's been
Absolutely. Let's do a check-in next year and see how much more the world has changed and what more impact we've created.
Yeah, it's going to be profound for sure.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you everybody for listening. Bye.
Thanks for listening in to today's Get Fruitful conversation. If you've enjoyed what you've heard, I invite you to give us a 5-star rating, leave a review, subscribe to the podcast, and tell your friends and colleagues to check it out too. This will help us reach a wider audience and make sure you don't miss out on future episodes. If you'd like to get in touch, connect with other like-minded people in business, and continue conversations about topics discussed here, then I'd love you to come and find our community online. It's free to join us. Just search for the Get Fruitful Business for Good group over on Facebook, visit my website, getfruitfulmarketing.com, or click the links in the show notes. I'd love to hear what business for good means for you. Until next time, goodbye for now.